best thing in Dark Souls is very subjective. Some people say it's the music, some people say it's the bosses, some people say it's the areas, combat, etc., etc. My personal opinion is the best thing in Dark Souls is definitely the boss fights, by far. Boss fights are my favorite thing in pretty much any game. I love a good boss fight, and Dark Souls, they have never failed. Well, they have failed a few times at making amazing boss fights, but more often than not, they do a wonderful job. So I figured I will rank my least favorite boss from each Souls game, and the next video might be my favorite boss from each Souls game or my favorite area from each Souls game. It depends, and say hi to my cat right here. His name is Emil, like from Nier. So yeah, let's get on with the video. The worst spot in Demon Souls would definitely have to go to Dragon God. Every boss in Demon Souls has a gimmick. Pretty much the only ones that don't have one are Old King Alot, the Penetrator, and Flame Lurker, and that's really it. Every other boss is a gimmick. Armored Spider is armor, so he has really one weak point. Maiden Astrai has a guy guarding him. Educator has a weak point on his side, and so on and so on. The Dragon Gods has the worst though. His weak point is this little horn on his chin, and to get to it, you have to shoot him with these ballistas in the arena, and to get to them, you have to go through a very slow stealth section, which is not fun. It basically turns the game into a worse Metal Gear Solid, and I mean, it could be the prelude to Sekiro, but Sekiro had much better stealth gameplay, and I really love the stealth gameplay in Sekiro, one of my favorite parts of the game, but I'm getting a little sidetracked, and the Dragon God is just not fun. He does way too much damage, and I understand he's probably meant to be fought in-game, but chances are you'll be doing this area maybe your second time, but it depends. Demon Souls gives you a lot of freedom on where you want to go. There's not much about this guy that hasn't been said by a million other Souls YouTubers, so I'm just going to move on to Dark Souls 1. Coming in at the worst spot in Dark Souls 1 Artorias. Just kidding, it is the Bed of Chaos, as if it wasn't obvious enough. What do I say about this boss? Where do I even start? Or what do I say that hasn't already been said? The falling ground is annoying, sweeping attacks do way too much damage and cover way too much range, and the general boss just kind of looks ugly, and the worst part about it is probably the run-up. I don't think this boss would be nearly as bad as people made it out to be if it was just, you know, closer. If maybe Miyazaki put a bonfire right outside of the room, it wouldn't be as bad, but you have to make like this nearly 2-minute long trek to get to the boss, which doesn't seem that bad, but it really starts to add up after you keep dying in ways that just really aren't fair to you. The boss's whole gimmick is it has 2 weak points, one on the right, one on the left. You destroy them, it opens up this like big hole in the middle where you have to jump on this branch and get to the center, which reveals to just be a little tiny bug. There really isn't much to this fight, it's just annoying. It makes the game a platformer temporarily, which this game was not built for platforming if you couldn't tell, and everything about it is just annoying. The run-up, annoying, the general fight, annoying, the attacks, annoying, the falling floor, annoying, everything about it is just negative. There is no positives, and I won't waste any more of your time. Let's move on to Dark Souls 2. In Dark Souls 2, it would probably go to the Belfry Gargoyles. What once was a very crucial and very enjoyable fight in Dark Souls 1 has been reduced to whatever this is. This fight is just not fun, and it's difficult for all the wrong reasons. The gargoyles can easily build up and gank you, and that's really just the whole fight. They don't have a ton of health, granted, but the timer for them spawning, it seems a little too short to me, so they could easily just build up, like I said, and you're pretty much screwed at that point. In Dark Souls 1, it was a really balanced fight, and a really good learning curve for you. It causes the player to adapt to the situation, and it teaches them that they need to learn how to juggle 2 enemies at once, especially 2 big foes, especially since Ornstein and Smoke come in way later into the game. It's a really good fight in the first one, but in the second one, it feels just kind of shoveled in as like this little reference to get the fans of Dark Souls 1 to be like, oh, I'm playing Dark Souls, because Dark Souls 2 really isn't connected to any of the other games lore-wise. It's why it makes barely any sense, and that's really all I have to say about the Gargoyles. Not a really great fight, and I don't have anything else to say about them, so we're moving on to Bloodborne. In my last Dark Souls video, my opinion on Bloodborne was not taken very well. And to that I say, I do not care, plus you are a Bloodborne dick rider. Anyway, my least favorite boss would probably go to the One Reborn. You might be asking, why not Witches of Himrick, Rom the Vacuous Spire, or even Mikolash, Host of the Nightmare? Well, Mikolash I can somewhat stand, even though his running can get a little bit annoying. I actually really like Rom. I think he's kind of cute in a weird way, and Witches of Himwick are just easy. I don't think they're a bad boss. The One Reborn is just another boss that I find annoying. Most of these rankings are just based on bosses that I think are personally annoying, and the One Reborn falls in that category. One, he's really ugly, unlike Rom. I love you, Rom. Rom, you're my boy. And two, the witches in his arena don't really do much, but when they do something, they surely do something, and it surely hurts you a lot. The One Reborn is also just not interesting to me. He's kind of just this big guy, does a lot of damage when he hits you, and I'm gonna be honest, that's a lot of the bosses in Bloodborne. Even though I think Bloodborne's bosses are really good, I think that most of the bosses boil down to I'm a very big guy, and when I hit you, I do a lot of damage, like Dark Beast Parl, or Cleric Beast, or Moon Presence. Now, Dark Souls 3 was a really difficult pick for me. It has some really great bosses. Champion Gundyr, Lothric, Younger Prince, Nameless King, Soul of Cinder, Gale, Pontiff Sullivan, just to name a few. But if I had to choose, it would probably go to, well, Champion Gravetender and Great Wolf in the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. This boss amounts to nothing. It's basically one of those NPC invader fights, but made so much worse. First off, the fight starts off with wolves, which are just reskins of dogs, and we all know that dogs are one of the, if not the most annoying enemy in Dark Souls history. At least these dogs don't inflict bleed or anything though, so that's good. But it's still really annoying. This boss also doesn't really have anything special about him. He's kind of just like if you got Artorias from Wish. He starts off as this scrawny little guy and stays as this scrawny little guy until his second phase where a wolf comes in and helps him. And this makes the fight a lot harder, but not in the way that I think it is fair. The wolf's moves are very spastic. You can barely tell what the wolf is doing half the time, and its moves also do a ton of damage, and not in a way that makes it feel fair, but in a way that makes it feel like you just got to Farum Azula in Elden Ring. It is absolutely horrible. But the wolf isn't that bad itself. It doesn't have too much health, and the little guy doesn't have that much health either. The fight is just there, and you can probably go through the whole DLC and miss it too, which I find really funny. It's a really forgettable boss. The only sort of rewarding thing about it is you get the little bone that lets you do PvP, and it also increases your healing by 1 using Estus Flasks, which is another really cool thing. But the boss itself, really annoying. The moveset for each of the bosses, including the wolf, the little guy, I forgot his name. I guess he's the Gravetender. I don't know. He's a Gravetender of the champion, but he has a very mundane moveset. He's one of those NPC invaders, just reskin with a boss health bar, and that's pretty much it. Moving on to Sekiro. Sekiro, another one of the Souls games that features some of my favorite bosses, such as Lady Butterfly, Ishin of Ashina, Great Shinobu Owl, Divine Dragon, and Ishin the Sword Saint. All of these bosses are great, and pretty much every Sekiro boss is beautiful. I love all of the bosses in Sekiro, but if I had to give it to one to be the worst spot, it would probably be either Corrupted Monk or the Folding Screen Monkeys, but I'd probably more so lean to the Folding Screen Monkeys. This is another fight where it's just kind of there. I mean, it's more of a minigame collection of anything. One monkey is at the very start and is invisible, and you have to kill it, which it gives you hints. It's basically just a puzzle as a boss fight, and I think it's really interesting. It's not a difficult one either, not at all. It's pretty easy to figure out, but the main focus of the fight is just figuring out the puzzles, and then when you find the monkeys, you chase down them and you kill them. That's really it, and that is all there is to it. So there's not much to say about it. I wouldn't even say it's a bad fight or it really should be considered a boss fight, but it's still pretty interesting. It's got a nice gimmick, it's got a nice mechanic. I just say out of all the bosses in Sekiro, it's probably my least favorite, but that's really it. Moving on to Elden Ring. Elden Ring, I don't even have to talk about it. It is the Fire Giant, and I'm pretty sure the Fire Giant would be a very popular choice for practically everyone who has played Elden Ring. First of all, after more consideration and thought, I've come to the conclusion that Caelid is not my least favorite area, but Mountaintop of the Giants is, so, my bad, I guess, but in part of that is the Fire Giant. Now, I actually kind of got the Fire Giant spoiled for me, because while I was playing Elden Ring, I was watching YouTube, and a thumbnail with him in it showed up, and I was like, huh, interesting. I didn't watch it, though, but I was like, oh, this is probably a huge boss in Elden Ring, and he looks kind of cool. To my surprise, he is not cool, he is actually very, very warm. Ignore that terrible pun, and let me actually talk about the boss itself. First off, I get this guy is like this huge giant, and giants are supposed to be really difficult to take down, but this guy's health pool just makes the fight incredibly tedious more than anything. It is not fun in the slightest, and I have more fun staring at drywall. But aside from that, the boss's moveset is really simple. He has this kind of like plate or whatever, I don't really know what it is, and he'll slam it occasionally, and he'll use big pyromancies and fire breath, and this fight is just more boring than anything. The hitboxes could also be a bit wonky. Elden Ring has a very bad difficulty spike, and it's very relevant with this guy. He does way too much damage. Even with like 50 vigor, he can nearly two-shot you, which is just absolutely insane. And he is the worst boss for this and many other reasons, and I am not going to get into it because there are plenty of things that has already been said by this guy in way better words that I could ever put it. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please, consider doing the basic stuff of subscribing and whatnot. I'm not going to try to force you or convince you, but it will make this little guy happy, I'm sure. And that's really all that matters. But if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.